Greetings and welcome back to my channel. My name is Brett and I'm glad you're here for another video. I was sitting back thinking I wanted to do a video that was something original, something away from the collections for a second. So I start pulling books down, and at the same time I was trying to form an idea of how to tie these books together. So this is a list of books that are sad, strange, or scary. Okay, so the first book I have, on the back it says 1911. On the front, Bertha Horsemeyer. So I found this book at a Goodwill for $1. I believe it was $1. It's all written in German and it's very, very old. Long story short, I have done research on this book, and this was published in North America for German-speaking immigrants, Protestant immigrants, okay? The thing is, these books were, if this book was actually published in 1911, first of all, that's expensive. Couldn't have been cheap in 1911 to have your name printed on books, but the reason names were printed on these books back then were because they served as kind of a historical document for your family. They were used in communal events so that you would know which book was yours. You know, in large communal events, you want to be able to get your book if you sit it down and you're catching the Holy Ghost or whatever you're catching. And it's also kind of like a family document at the same time that will be handed down. This was Grandma's hymn book. It made me think and wonder how this ended up in the thrift store. Was she the last of her family, last remaining surviving member of her family that she knew about? Was she the last member and she got sick? Perhaps you can search and figure out a little bit more going through obituaries and death records and how she died and things like that. But my point was a lot simpler, was that I feel like the family link has been broken, and perhaps get this back to the family, because this is something that should be handed down to great grandchildren and things like that. But it made me think of this book at the same time. If you've been watching my channel from the beginning, you will know that it's not spineless, it's everything. This is Roots by Alex Haley. It's an original first edition copy of Roots, but that's not what makes this particular book special. What makes it special to me is this was the first book that I stamped my Black Lit Geek seal on, and it also has my mother's beautiful signature on there, because this was my mother's book. I told my son, yeah, this is a book that came from Mom, and I told him how important it is to me. I gave him instructions on what he needs to do in the event of my demise to ensure that this book stays with family, just like this book wasn't able to stay with family. So that falls under the category of sad to me. This is The Ethics of the Dust by John Ruskin. It's just like 1866. Let me see. It's so weird. This is a book about an old lecturer instructing a classroom full of a group of girls. I won't say a classroom because I believe it was 9. This is actually written in play form. I'm going to show you in a second. I have to be careful. Oh, here's a picture of the old dude. This little tissue paper in there. And then you go over here, and it says Home Book Company, New York, 45 VC Street. I'll talk more about that in a moment. Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's an old lecturer with an incalculable age, and then they're a bunch of young girls, and he's basically teaching them about crystallization, formation of things from one form into another, like the formation of granite or things like that. And it made me think about pressed coal into diamonds, so I started thinking about it that way. Okay, so I started thinking about it, and this is like, what, 1866. This is the story. This is like this is the story of. It's kind of written. It's written in a play. It's like a play. This is the story of. It's like the right after the Civil War, 1866. 1866. This is the story of an old lecturer, and the story, you don't know how old he is, and Mr. Ruskin, John, meant for it to be that way because that's how he wrote it in the book. There were like 9 little girls of various ages, and he's talking to them about transformation, and all I could think about was he's turning them into housewives. That's what it made me think of, because he's talking about crystallization. So the first thing I thought was, okay, you're going to be a lump of coal, or you're going to be a good girl. You're going to be a proper wife and things of that nature. I saw this little. I was reading a little bit. Okay, but it's not that only a personification. L says, if it be, what will you gain by unpersifying it? Or what right have you to do so? Cannot you accept the image given to you in its life, and listen like children to the words which chiefly belong to you as children? I love them that love me, and those that seek me early shall find me. They were all quiet for a minute or two. Questions began to appear in their eyes. I cannot talk to you any more today. Take that rose crystal away with you and think. Okay, so it says ethics of the dust. Is what is he really there teaching or wanting to teach these girls? And why would you be speaking to these girls in such a way? Shit. Okay. One more thing about this ethics of dust was I meant to go back to this. Another thing about this book, The Ethics of Dust, that's a little bit more interesting was that it was printed at the home book company 45 VC. Wait a minute. Okay, so this book would have been printed between 1893. So this book would have been printed between 1893 and 1896. Reason being, because there's no date indicators in this book anywhere that gives you the exact date. The only thing you have is this, which is an indication of the publishing company on that tissue, well, protected by the tissue, that says New York Home Book Company, 1945 Vesey Street. But 1893 to 1896, those were the only years the home bookstore was in business because it went bankrupt. I thought that was just a bit disturbing. As is this book. This is a book by William Katz. It came from the bookstore collection. It's called Red Heat. If you look closer in this book, you'll see a bunch of runners, right? It says, a race to end all races. It is the day of the Boston Marathon. Creepy. As runners prepare themselves for an annual contest, Russia readies itself for an ultimate risk, the ultimate race, nuclear war. Just hours away, a Russian fighter plane disguised as a British commercial airliner inches closer to its target, a top-secret military installation in Boston. Without warning, hundreds of thousands will perish in an instant. The world will be plunged into chaos unless one man who senses something is wrong can convince the nation to act before it's too late. Red Heat. Of course, the red in here, if you look a little closer, you'll see a Russian symbol in there. But the fact that we're talking about a bombing and we're talking about Boston Marathon, at the Boston Marathon, 1982. So we're talking about a Boston bombing in 1982. I have so many paperbacks that talk about so many things that are going on. But anyway, moving on. This next book is from 1910. It is Atwater's American Farmer's Figurer from 1910. It's used to calculate price per pound. And we're talking corn, we're talking wheat. It's like distilled corn. It lets you know how many, how much you will get for it, how much the cost will be per 100 pounds, per 50 pounds. You know, so you can kind of know all of that land that you put all of these wonderful things on, you know, what it's worth. It's a percent table on there to let you know. I'm sure that's used to calculate some sort of tax. There's cotton planters. And then I saw it. It says cotton pickers table, okay? And on here it says the top line gives price per 100 pounds. Under the pound column, that gives the number of pounds. So it's like 500 pounds, $1.25. And right then and there, I was just like, wow, let me close this book up. So yeah, that falls under the sick category, definitely. Sadistic, strange, sick, just as much as this Red Heat Boston Marathon. Okay, so we already finished with that one. Okay, so the next book is School History of the United States. I started thinking about this book, and it is basically how children were taught 100 years ago. You know, so this would have been not in the hands of, not necessarily in the hands of little black kids. We're talking about 1916, so we're talking about during World War I. You know, there weren't a bunch of black kids reading and in school. They were trying, but, you know, we won't get into all of that. Okay, so I was reading it, and it was talking about John Brown's raid in Harper's Ferry, it's like 1855, no, it was later than that. I think it's like 1859. Was it 1859? I don't know. Okay, so John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry in Virginia in 1859. One thing that I was just like, oh wow. In 1858, he left Kansas, and in July 1859, settled near Harper's Ferry, Virginia. He's talking about John Brown. His purpose was to stir up a slave insurrection in Virginia and so secure the liberation of the Negroes. With this in view, one Sunday night in October 1959, he, with less than 20 followers, seized the United States armor at Harper's Ferry and freed as many slaves and arrested as many whites as possible. But no insurrection or uprising of slaves followed, and before he could escape to the mountains, he was surrounded and captured by Robert E. Lee, then a colonel in the Army of the United States. Brown was tried on charges of murder and of treason against the state of Virginia, found guilty, and in December 1959, he was hung. I was just wondering how this book can talk about that rebellion, but actually say nothing about Nat Turner's rebellion. I started thinking about Nat Turner, which was 200 miles away, West Virginia, 1859, something like that. And that was what, 60 years prior, 70 years prior to this book being published. So it was very, very selective to use the Harper's Ferry, because you don't want to teach what happened as far as Nat Turner. But what I noticed what was left out was Nat Turner, 1831. That insurrection was a little bit more defining as far as Civil War goes, but I could understand why John Bach McMaster would leave that out. Pretty strange and sadistic right there. Okay, so the next one I have is Johnny Gruelle. Raggedy Andy and the Camel with the Wrinkled Knees by Johnny Gruelle. This book was 1924, and I don't know how I ended up thinking about this, but I was looking at the camel with the wrinkled knees, and I bookmarked this. This was the introduction. Ha! Came a voice from behind the tree, and as they looked, Raggedy Ann and Andy saw the queerest creature come walking towards them. But he had evidently been played with so much, his legs were no longer straight and stiff. Instead, the Canton flannel camel's legs were wrinkled, and so out of press, it seemed that they would pitch forward upon his head at every step. When the camel came up to Raggedy Ann and Andy, he sat down beside them, and in doing so his knees gave way with him, and he rolled over upon his side. Raggedy Ann said as he helped the camel to sit up, "You almost fell over that time." "Indeed I did," the camel laughed. "My legs are not what they used to be. See how wrinkled my knees are?" Raggedy Ann tried to smooth out the wrinkles in the camel's knees, but the camel smiled and said, "It doesn't do a bit of good trying to get the wrinkles out. They just come right back again just as soon as I stand up." He continued, "You see, when I was brand new, I was made with sticks in each leg, but these sticks were the sticks which were made to put in meat when it is tied up and roasted, and each stick had a point on the end. Well, sir, after I had been played with for a few weeks, those pointed sticks punched right up through my back, and I wasn't safe for a little boy to play with. So the little boy's mother pulled the meat sticks out of my legs, and that let me sag down until my knees grew terribly wrinkled." I mean, it's 1924. Yeah, I mean, I get it. But I just find that a little disturbing. Just that description. Raggedy Ann and Andy. I find that a little sadistic. Scary. That's scary. Okay, speaking of, this is my last book. Okay, so I found this. It's called Pandora's Box, which I don't mess around, okay? I'll tell you like that. Greek mythology. It's 3D Greek mythology. So I'm looking through. I'm gonna show you something specific. Very, very specific. It's a pop-up book, so it shows a lot of Trojan horses and I was like, okay. And then I look right here. And I see this thing fell out. And I see all of these figures like that. And okay, so I saw all these little devilish imps and things in there. And then I said, okay, this is the whole point. This little tie on the end of this book. So I open it, and the first thing I see, I was like, why did I open this? And I open it, and I see this. Sadistic, right? Serpents, you know, some Medusa thing going on. Very, very just, you know, kind of mythology. Yeah, call it what you want, but it was just kind of sadistic to me. But then it made me think of something. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. This is Candace Owens' Blackout. Completely freaked me out. Okay, so I don't know about you, but that just weirded me out because it was the first thing that popped into my head when I saw it. And you know, that's not the shade I'm throwing on Candace Owens. Who needs to throw shade on Candace Owens? Anyway, she does that all by herself. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.
Aggregate what they can do with the PS team, paperbacks, and we usually talk about